Okay, it's 8:15. I'd like to open the, I'm sorry, 5:15. That's about the time we may get over with tonight's agenda. So I'd like to open the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners work session meeting for 28th of January, 2025. Have the call to order. Commissioner Rutledge,
Here.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Commissioner Chance,
Here.
Commissioner Chismar is here, and we have Commissioner, our Chair, Edding is not here today. Okay. Approval of the agenda. Anyone have any changes to the agenda? I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any amendments to the agenda? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next on the report is the Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I only have one thing to note this evening, and that's the Municipal Citizens Academy starts tomorrow night. First inaugural session will be in the Bel Air Police Department Community Room at 6:30. We have about 8 or 9 people that have registered to attend, so we're pretty excited. I know you all have Hartford night tomorrow night, but you'll be on the agenda further down when you all can possibly be there. So it's the only thing I have to report. I have some stuff later in the meeting, but for now, that's all I have.
For that academy, do you need any of the commissioners present for any of the other sessions except for the commissioners?
I do not know, just for the commissioner session. This is primarily just an educational forum, and you're certainly welcome to attend and participate and be a part of it, but presentation-wise, I would need you for the night, I forget the date, but it's in February.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that report. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from the Rockfield Foundation. That would be Donna and Keely. Thank you for coming tonight
Thank you for having
to talk
us.
to us.
Do we introduce like in a regular meeting or? Okay. We usually don't need one. Donna Dickey, and I'm going with 501 Churchville Road, Bel Air, Maryland. Do you want to get yours?
It's Kelly Kaltoff, and I'll do 501 Churchville Road.
So thank you for having us tonight and letting us update you on what's going on at Rockfield so that you can be better informed if anybody asks you what's going on. As you know, we have started the process of the addition. We actually started this process back in 2019. And of course, it got put on hold because of COVID. We ramped it right back up as soon as we could. At that time, we picked our architect firm, ADW. And with that, we had some questions from the get-go about certain things, and one of them was the sprinkler system. At that time, the county said that it was not necessary. I know things have changed since that time, and we found that out back in August when our permit was denied because there was no plan for sprinkler system. With that being said, everybody keeps saying, oh, the addition is creating the cause for the sprinkler system, and it's not. The cause for the sprinkler system is the second floor. And we were informed by the county that even if we halted our progress with the addition, we decided, hey, we can't do this. Because that's where we were when we called Steve. We're like, hey, we're not going to be able to move forward. And he's like, yeah, we are. Let's figure this out. So that's where we are, is it's because of the second floor. And at that meeting, that's when they said, even if we didn't move forward with the addition, we would still have to upgrade the building to standard code. They're assuming that second floor is used as event space, which it's not. It's Kelly's office. There's a coat room, a bathroom, and then there might be 4 or 5 gentlemen up there changing at one time. I'm not telling you that we don't need a sprinkler system. I'm just saying that's just some of the history on where we are now and how we landed to this point. That's all I've got. Do you have anything, Cal?
Kind of just to flow off what Donna said, first and foremost, the public safety at Rockfield is always on our top priority. We never want anyone to be injured at Rockfield, especially something that we can control. We did want to do a further background check. Now, it's when we did bring in a fire prevention engineer to help us and guide us through this process, because I don't know fire code. I've never done anything of this scale in my entire life. So we brought in Dave McBride. He is a fire prevention engineer, as well as sits on the Harford County Board for Fire Prevention, just to kind of guide us through what's what, and figure out the best, scenario for Rockfield. We want to always keep in the back of our minds that even though we're not on the preservation, this building is still delicate, it's old, we don't know what's in the walls, we don't know the can of worms that's going to be open. But once again, public safety is, the top priority. At the end of the day, the town owns this building. If the town wants to put sprinklers in here, it's your building, you have every right to do so, and Rockfield will fund, as we agreed to, the other 50% of it. So it's not that we're pushing back on anything that you guys would like to do with your space. We were just trying to find a alternative that can benefit not just the foundation, but also keep public safety in mind, plus taxpayers' dollars at the same time. So watching the footage from last week, it was very disheartening, because it's never our intention to put anybody's public safety at risk. And I felt that the foundation was kind of being accused of that by asking for us, that we went out and hired a fire prevention engineer just to provide us more information, because it's a lot of codes. I'm sure you guys know it's like a foreign language. Like I've learned so much about fire prevention in the last 6 months. Like it's bizarre. And I still don't even know. It's just a lot to take in. So that's why I wanted to bring an expert. But like we told Eddie, we met with him, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now at this point, that if this is what the town wants, of course we agree to it. We don't want to do anything to jeopardize, again, public safety, as well as, but we're also trying to keep the historic integrity of the manor as well, in the back of our minds too. But I just kind of wanted to clear that up, because it's not.
And on that same note, it was almost like the foundation, by any means, we have a great executive director right now. We have
Oh,
a
thanks.
great board, and we do wonderful things together. It's finally like all the cogs are in place. Before, it was very disjointed. You had 2 executive directors in there that could not even move a picture frame without calling Steve Klein and sending one of the boys over at DPW. We are functioning very well on our own. The foundation itself takes our responsibility with Rockfield very, very seriously. And never since when the town opened the doors at Rockfield for public use, the only thing that was required by code then was the egress out of the 2nd floor. And nobody else from the county has ever come to us in all these years to say, hey, now you need this. And even when we started and we inquired about a sprinkler system, we were told no, it wasn't necessary. We didn't have the square footage that you needed to do that. So by any means are we trying to be disrespectful to the town, or the foundation being derelict on their duties with Rockfield. We love Rockfield. Kelly and I both love it. We have a board that's very active, and we've never seen this kind of collaboration at Rockfield before. So, but anyway, thank you. And if you were here to answer questions,
Do you want to have, if
I
it's
mean-
okay, Todd will probably be able, Todd's from Cascon, he's actually the contractor that's building
Right.
the new structure. I felt like it was good to have him here so he can actually explain to you the construction and kind of where we stand, instead of coming from me when I don't know all the lingo.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Todd Morrison from Cascon Construction. I'm head of project manager lead for Rockfield. So far, we've done all the demolition. We've got the slab poured, all the infrastructure for that. We set the steel, and we're working on the wood framing right now. So the master schedule says that we should be done sometime in early May. That's what we're shooting for. But it
And they
takes,
have the
but
timeline.
it has to be with the cooperation of the sprinkler system installation as well, which seems to be an unknown. So that's sort of an issue right now.
So, regarding the sprinkler system, I know Jeff McBride very well, and can attest to his work is certainly beyond dispute. I trust him a great deal on these matters, and I appreciate you sending over those conversations for us to take a look at. So, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, it's your assessment of the situation that the sprinkler system, there is no way to make the building code compliant without installing it, correct?
If I could jump in.
Absolutely.
Paul Thompson, President of Architectural Design Works. So codes are subject to interpretations, okay? And I think what's happening here is that the current county plans reviewer has a specific interpretation of that part of the code. Jeff doesn't agree. He believes that an interconnected smoke detection system would save lives. Sprinklers typically save buildings, and it's not historically significant, so 15,000 versus 250. The code specifically says that assembly spaces can't be in a two-story building without sprinkling. We don't believe that the second floor is assembly. We believe it's office, so it's an unseparated mixed use. They're saying that it's a non-compliant condition. So we would have had to sprinkler it anyway. What I think happened is the town opened it up as an event space and never really got it vetted by the county's review process. And so here we are, right? We went for the addition. The size of the addition did not require the sprinkler. And Jeff said that in his
Right.
comments.
Yeah, so I'm not so much concerned about the addition as it relates to the sprinkler system. I'm just curious about this. I mean, is it essentially your assertion that a change in interpretation from the folks at the county have put us in this situation?
I believe that's the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Because obviously it was interpreted differently perhaps in the past than it is being now.
Right. I mean, I suppose that it would have had to have been interpreted. This is not something that is generally overlooked when reviewing building plans. You know, whether or not a sprinkler system is installed is a relatively obvious thing. So that's interesting, and I appreciate that insight.
And to be frank, I mean, Jeff and I deal with this in multiple jurisdictions across the state all the time. Different plans reviewers just interpret things differently, as judges and attorneys do as well.
So,
Thank you.
Paul, while you're
Yes.
still up there, if you could, so just so, I guess there were probably a lot of situations around town where buildings were grandfathered, so they didn't have to like put in a sprinkler system, law firms with offices on different floors, et cetera. And then if the fire code changes, isn't it normally prospective and not retroactive, requiring everybody to shut down business and then put in sprinklers?
That's correct.
Can you,
And
because I know you've got a lot of experience in
So
this
that's-
area, so while you're here,
that is correct.
Yeah.
No question. In fact, I have had experiences where local jurisdictions have overridden the county's interpretation and decided to accept what they believe to be a reasonable risk, if you will. I'll cite one in Havity Grace, Coakley's Pub. We were expanding that. There were apartments there for 100 years. The city at the time said, we're not going to require them to sprinkler. We don't believe we're increasing the risk to life safety. And they approved it. And there they are today. So we have a similar experience in Aberdeen as well. But
yeah, well, thank you very much for that
course, yeah. You're welcome.
perspective and expertise. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I know with, although it's not designated historic, it is historic, not in the terms of, maybe in legal terms of the town code. But there's always that balance between maintaining the historic nature and all, and the modern codes and the modern building codes that go. So there is a balance there. I understand that. It's gonna be, you know, we just awarded the contract to get an estimate, so it'd be nice to see what that estimate is. You know, going forward, I mean, that's from my perspective before we kind of say, is there something we should do different or whatever, but, you know, just to have all the data in front of,
Sure.
for me, I would like to have all the data in front of me before, you know, go forward with.
So our biggest
something like that.
concern is we've got a building that's moving through construction, and somehow this has to integrate at some point, if that's the decision
Right.
that the town makes, right? We don't want to get to the point where we've got to then jam events that have already been scheduled
Right.
to be able to open and serve the community. So we're here to
Okay.
continue the discussion.
So construction's going on schedule?
It's on schedule for
Right. Well, that's
Weather
great.
hasn't been helpful, but yes.
Right. Yeah,
think
well,
they're-
I know.
think it's moving great. For it being 8 degrees outside some weeks, like, yeah.
Yeah,
You're going to start seeing the roof come together soon.
right. Great.
I would just like to, for Donna and Kelly's concerns, certainly hope none of my questions were interpreted by you as me being unhappy with anybody managing Rockfield. My main concern that we were asked to approve, what was the expenditure we approved? $47,000, and that was the first time, that I'd seen a request to spend $47,000 to find out how much more money we would have to spend. So, as a fiduciary for the taxpayers, thought I wanted to ask some questions about, what has triggered this on the ground geographically. Now we understand it's the interpretation of the county on the 2 stories, irrespective of the idea to put on a new addition. And sort of that's, but certainly from my perspective, Rockfield's a fantastic place. You guys are doing a wonderful job, and nobody, I don't think, is to blame here at all. It is just as Paul mentioned, you can, with these various interpretations of new people in and out of various capacities, all of a sudden get a surprise out of the blue that is not happy news for anybody. But that was certainly my perspective on sort of following up with the questions on, okay, where are we, how'd we get here, type of a thing. And I don't want either of you or the board or anybody to think that, at least from my perspective, that you don't do a fabulous job. It's a tremendous asset to the community. It's one of those situations where I agree with Commissioner Chismar that, we have to see the bottom line before we know, can we stroke the check type of a thing, because we always have to have a balanced budget as a matter of law, and can't do deficit spending. But we are, my perspective is, overall, I think it's something just has to be done. We cannot have a tremendous asset that Rockfield is to the attracting visitors and people coming to town and spending their money and getting introduced to Bel Air and all the other collateral benefits that can't be measured. We can't just put it out on a grid and say, well, here's the magic numbers. I think we all know we've got, tremendous resources in the town of Bel Air, and Rockfield's one of them. So thank you very much for the hard work you're doing. Thank you for the construction team and you guys coming out here this evening, sharing your expertise.
Yeah, and it was nothing that you said personally, just so, you don't have to go home and think about that. But it just as a general, like Donna mentioned before, we've, especially the last 7 years that I've been a part of Rockfield, we've tried tremendously to take as much weight as we can off of the town when it comes to maintaining certain things at Rockfield, paying for certain things at Rockfield that we weren't even, per our lease prior to the new one, responsible to pay, and that we would work with the town and be like, hey, we'll split the bill with you guys, paving parking lots, putting up security lights, adding HVAC to the cottage, just name a couple, that we want to continue to be able to do that. But when it came to the sprinklers, of course, public safety is top priority. But we wanted to see, is this what we really have to do? Or, let's hire somebody that is more knowledgeable than any of us are that, specialize in this. But like I said, at the end of the day, you guys own the building, and we want to do whatever you guys require of us, because we appreciate you allowing us to be there. So,
And it was never, so as the foundation, it was never our intention to ever have to come to you and have to ask you for money to finish our project.
yeah.
Sure.
We wanted to
we
be
made that.
able to come to you and present to you this beautiful finished
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time, we
Yep.
appreciate it.
Yep.
And anytime you want to come over,
Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. Guys do a great job, and I appreciate it. And without a doubt, this wasn't in the crystal ball when we first looked at it. And then when you had to peel it back and find out that you had this to deal with, you have no choice. And I would hate for us to say, oh, we're not going to help you with that, or we can't do that, and then have some catastrophe. So we've got some work to do, for sure. But we appreciate you coming this evening. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our tentative agenda for the Monday, February 3rd Town Hall meeting. We'll have a couple of presentations. Okay. The tentative agenda, we're moving on to the tentative agenda for Monday, the 3rd of February, the Town Hall meeting. We'll start off with we'll have some presentations, and I believe that's you, Chief.
Thank you, sir. The first presentation that we'll have is Corporal Scott Hogue. who is in our auxiliary police force. And if, for those that aren't familiar, the auxiliary force is basically a volunteer organization that's part of the police department. They come out and help us with traffic direction, any other kind of assistance that we need at events, many events that occur throughout the town. Since I've been here, we have not had any of our auxiliary officers reach the 150 hours needed to qualify for a tax credit. It's through House Bill 646, and in that tax credit, I think it's about $7,000 that they get in credit if they work a number of hours, and that number of hours is 150. Well, Corporal Scott Hogue has reached those hours last year, which is very commendable. He has a full-time job, has family, has other things to do, but he always somehow comes down and offers his service to the Town of Bel Air Police Department, and we want to honor him for doing that last year. So the next thing we want to do, we want to recognize Officer First Class Nick Rhodes, who in his secondary life, he's a U.S. Marine. Oh, by the way, Scott Hogue is also a United States Marine. He served in the United States Marine Corps. He, in fact, was actually injured in one of the Mideast battles, and we'll have a little biography for the mayor to present that night to go over that. Officer First Class Nick Rhodes, going back to him, he was promoted to Staff Sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and we want to recognize him for his commendable service in the Marine Corps. Also, our experience down Washington, D.C., it was incredible, it was extraordinary, and we were very proud to represent the town and honored. And I do have to say it was very, very cold, and I actually brought back a cold from that event. But it was a great experience, and thanks again for allowing us to do that. And that's all I have, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody came back safe. It was not
Yes.
an uneventful event. It was an eventful event, but uneventful from your
Yeah.
perspective
Yes,
for you.
it
So
was.
that's a good thing.
Thank you, sir.
So Officer Rhodes, he's in the Marine Reserves?
Yes, sir, he
okay.
is. Marine Corps Reserve. Mm-hmm.
That's good. Anybody else have any comments? Yeah? Okay, so then for our new business, we were looking at, there are several ordinances, or two ordinances and a resolution coming up. That's ordinance 83925, an ordinance amending Article 7 and 14 and permitted use tables of the development regulation as related to mixed-use centers in Chapter 165 of the Bel Air Town Code. Mr. Small, I think that is
Sure.
you.
One of the things to note is that the previous ordinance 837 was changed to 839, and 837 we're
Right.
saying would be left to somewhat die. That was done just to prevent any kind of confusion or excessive amendments to the existing
Right.
code.
It's cleaner this way without
Yeah.
having too many amendments.
So in the, in 839, what we did was we revised the text that references shared parking so that it says may, that the planning commission may require shared parking rather than must. There was a revision of the 40% limit under the guidelines down to 35%. That's something I'm sure you guys will need to, I kept getting different vibes as to what you would want, so you'll have to decide whether that's appropriate. One of the reasons why we put it down to 35 was ECDC's contention that if you have retail on the first floor, you have residential above that, that you can also do another floor because your requirement would only be 35% commercial. So that's something, again, you'll have to take a look at. And the last was the removal of the exemption for previous approvals.
Correct. Yeah, we discussed this quite a bit with the previous work session meeting, and we did get both the Planning Commission and ECDC comments in. Okay, sorry. We discussed this. Volume up the mic. Right, we had a good discussion on this at the last working group meeting. There we go, I can hear myself now. And we got the Planning Commission and ECDC comments from them and incorporated those in on the shared parking, as Mr. Small said. I think the only thing we were discussing last time was that the reduction from the 50% to the 40% or 35% with Planning Commission approval. I was still looking more at the 40% type number. Again, because we're trying to keep that business district as more of the business district, because that's what it's zoned for. And by giving that extra 10% reduction there, we do get, something back if the applicant provides, demonstrates excellence of design and consistency with the comprehensive plan. So I'm still looking at the 40% number.
I like the 35% number, not just because of the reasons that were articulated by ECDC, although I do think that they are certainly persuasive, but because that 15% range, we're keeping I think this is the happy medium, because we're keeping the hard line at 50%, which is that the goal is that for any underlying zoning use, you ought to meet a majority of that use. And I think in
Right.
general, the board agrees that that is wise. However, I think that giving the Planning Commission the authority to go that extra 5% is also wise. And presumably, and I think as we've written it, to go below 40% than to 35% would require even more extraordinary, excellence of design, as it's stated in the ordinance. And I think, having listened to the Planning Commission's comments, I think that that's appropriate, because obviously when we legislate, we are legislating with exception to when we make distinctions between zones, we're legislating one size fits all. We don't decide particulars of projects. That's what the Planning Commission does. And so I think it's wise to give them that extra breathing room when they're deciding the particulars of the project, understanding still that the wisdom of keeping the underlying land use is sound, and that the overarching goal of the ordinance is sound, and I certainly support it. But having heard the ECDC comments, wanting to incorporate that, I personally think that the 35% bottom line is good when in concert with the 50% top line. Those are my thoughts on the issue.
I just had a technical follow-up question. Can you hear me okay? All right, good. Okay, so just Director Small, I'm just looking at the third page of the bill here, just if you could refresh my memory again on where we've got the table there. We've got residential. We're talking about the mixed-use special development in RO, B1, B2, B2A, B3, B3A. Is it correct?
Correct.
So, and if someone avails themselves of that, then they come before you and the Planning Commission, and there's a whole lot of criteria they go through.
Correct.
And then on retail, the mixed use is deleted in the SDs, and I take it that's for, you're cleaning up something in the code there,
Yeah, it's
not really a big substantive impact.
not really. If you wanted to keep the reference in the retail section of the permitted use chart, we could do that, and it would not, I would get sleep that night. So I would not have a problem if the commissioners wanted to keep the retail in there. It's basically what you're doing is you're just trying to make sure that people don't miss it, Right now, the performance standards are found in the service area.
I see.
Not retail and not residential.
Okay. So by eliminating those, we're not doing anything to limit a property owner's rights to pursue a mixed-use project.
Correct. That's not,
It's
would not be my
imposing a
interpretation.
restriction.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to put retail in a mixed use, they would be able to do that.
Okay, just making sure of that. And then, I know we've discussed this before, but sort of the 50% type of rule of thumb was something that was generated from I think the ideas came, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but came from the Planning Commission's review of the mall project. Is that
Right, their
correct?
underpinning of the Hartford Mall was to make it, make sure that it's remained consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Right, so that's the idea, the 50%
Yes.
came through that, and that's why the Planning Commission supported this concept that
Yes.
this ordinance has in it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then I definitely think that giving the Planning Commission the latitude to, under its special review, to, in certain circumstances and its good judgment, to go to the 35%, I'm supportive of that. I think that, I don't think we're opening up Pandora's box. I think we've got some excellent people on the Planning Commission, and you know, I think that while the points you know, that have been brought to us through the ECDC might have been, you know, in some people's minds might have been thinking about Main Street, and you know, that's not what anybody's messing with right here. Yeah. But the point's still well taken, because we have a lot of areas of the town, you know, that are going to need some infill, some rehabilitation, some new ideas. And so you know, we're just a work session. I'm not voting on it right now, but just I'm inclined to think that the 35% is a wise number. I'd like to hear you know, Commissioner Chance's views on that.
I'm in agreement with that. I do believe that it's really, really important for us to remember that we have a planning commission, and we have good people on there who are looking at what the town can be, could be, should be, what the future holds here. And I want to be very careful that we're not tying development to this one thing that some people like and other people don't, that we allow the Planning Commission to have the opportunity to review what's in front of them and not have their hands tied. And I worry that we could easily get into that if we are not careful here.
Well, I don't think we're tying their hands any more so than all the other regulations that they have to abide by when you talk about building height, setbacks, and all. This is just another parameter that we're just saying, these are the bounds, these are the limits, and that's all that we're here to say, because we're in charge of the regulations. They're in charge of implementing those on the individual projects, no doubt about that. That's their role and responsibility. So you know, I just think that giving another 10% is from 50 to 40. Well, I just mean in general, on the concept of saying 50% is what they can have, and another 10% the Planning Commission can say you can have another 10% you know, increase in gross floor space for that. So that's all. I mean, I think it's our responsibility to have the big picture, and I think in terms of how we view the town, we're more the strategic looking from the aspects of the regulations and the code. And the Planning Commission is there to implement those on a case-by-case basis. you know, we don't have a lot of definition of what excellence of design means. And you, granted, we do have good people on the planning commission, but, you know, that's today. If we don't, you know, it's pretty wide open as to what excellence of design is. And that's, you know, it's not very well defined in that, and that's why just giving the 10%, you know, boost, I think is sufficient.
And I understand that. I think that, you know, in a commercially zoned plot, there is still the option for a developer to say, develop the entire thing as a multifamily use development. I think by giving the 35%, we may find ourselves in a position where folks are more likely to incorporate mixed use into a potential redevelopment of a large portion of town. And I think we would be, to speak to your point, we would be strategically advantaged by more mixed-use development. I tend to see mixed-use development as a wave of the future and a way to balance commercial and residential growth in a really smart way. And so I want to be able to give the latitude to say, we're going to incentivize mixed-use development. And this I see as one way to do that. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to roll in and come with 35%. There's going to be a lot that has to be proven. I understand that it's not hard and fast, but there are four bullet points, of increasing intensity that as you get farther away from that 50% benchmark, the Planning Commission applies. But I really do view this as we talk about carrots and sticks. I view this as a good carrot for incentivizing mixed-use development. I think the town will be better off for that.
One thing I should mention, there was a thought of putting in another reference out in addition to excellence of design, like consistency or in harmony with the context of the area. There's a big difference between the environment of Hartford Mall and the environment of Standard on Bond. Standard on Bond has residential right next to it. And the idea that they could go below that 50% would not be inconsistent with its context because there is so much residential in that area. I'm not sure I could find that context at the Hartford Mall. It is commercial.
Right.
And I think that that's something that certainly staff would point out to the Planning Commission. And of course, the Planning Commission also came up with that without our prodding. So that may be something that we could add and send it out between now and next Monday.
I think that would be
Yeah.
a great guideline to include.
Be something for us to consider.
Yep.
Agreed.
To not to belabor this point, but just to agree with the wisdom of that, Kevin. This is perhaps why the range is necessary, because just to concur, a mixed-use development, right next to a residential neighborhood is going to look very different from a mixed-use development, at the Four Corners, at the heart of our commercial district. And the Planning Commission ought to have the tools to enforce that difference.
Right.
And I think
Right.
also before we're enforcing things, I always talk about a way to, get the public and private sector to work together without having to use too many sticks. I think it's good that we incentivize these things and that we provide reason to do them, reason for people to go in this direction when they come to us with a project, when they come to us with an investment. I think that's a smart way to do things and ultimately a safer way to do things for the town strategically.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to the next ordinance. It's ordinance 840-25, an ordinance amending Article 3, 10, and lot requirement tables of the development regs as related to the density limits in Chapter 165 of the Bel Air Town Code.
Okay, no. This
Small.
is the same thing happened to this ordinance as did the last one. It went from 838 to 840, and 838 will die without action. This ordinance is based on residential density. What we did was we removed the references to light requirements in the B2 district. So the B2 district does not change except for like one item on there. And that was accessory structures setback. We found that a little odd that accessory structures needed to be 3 feet out when the principal structure does not. So we kept that in there. Removal of the density limits in the B2 district. Removal of density changes from all districts except for B2A and B3A. I think it was clear that the commissioners were a little uncomfortable with all of this kind of scattershot changes, and you wanted to focus just on B2A and B3A. That was my impression anyway. Removal of the minimum lot size for townhomes. I think that was a direct request from Chair Edding. Removal of the 30 units per dwelling units per acre limit for 55 and older. So what will happen with that is it will just defer to residential or for multifamily. So it 55 and over, since it does not have a special allowance for density, it will just go to 20 units per acre. I think I sent to everyone that there is we looked at 3 of the 55 and older facilities that I knew of. One is Overlook/Legacy at Gateway. That one ended up to be around 18 units per acre. It could be much lower, but we did not include the stormwater management pond because that was shared with another development. Hearthstone is 22.9 units per acre, so that's over that 20 units per acre. So they would become a non-conforming use. But I'm not sure I'm too worried about that. There's no place for them to expand to. They're surrounded by development. And then last is King's Crossing, and that is 11.5 units per acre. And that one has a lot of streams. It has a major stream running through, so a lot of that property is dedicated to that stream. Then last item was removal of the exception for previous approvals. So based on comments that I got from the commissioners.
Just to jump right into that 55 and over discussion that we were having, am I correct in reading that in Harford County, the density for 55 and over is lower than the general density?
I was surprised, yes.
Yeah. No clue as to why that might be?
I did not reach out to them.
Sure.
I can certainly do that if requested. But it seemed odd to me.
Right.
Right, I saw that.
Well, I understand that Commissioner
Go ahead.
Commissioner Rutledge, your concern was finding whatever the number is of, appropriate means and matching 55 and over to the standard. So it certainly seems like we've got some good data here to work on that with.
It could be that there was a desire there to provide for more green space in 55 and over. And they also have special regulations for 55 and over in the county that we have also special regulations, but I think the county's asking for more than we would. We're urban versus they're more suburban.
And in Aberdeen, the information you sent us says Aberdeen for 55 and over is actually 14 units per acre. But Havre de Grace didn't have one from the information you sent us.
Right. Yes.
So we're equal to or higher density if we stay
But-
with 20.
Actually, I have 14 units per acre for Harford County.
Oh,
Aberdeen and Havre de Grace are relatively silent to density.
I'm sorry, I read the papers you sent wrong. Okay. You're right, that is Harford County.
And typically, I'll reach out to my counterparts. I just didn't have time to do that.
So while we're talking about the perspective on the 55 and older, type of thing, just, you know, because we were, the whole motivation of these changes here were to, you know, have these changes to add density limitations that currently don't exist in the B2A and the B3A.
Correct.
And so my point being, whatever number we thought was appropriate, that I wanted to be age neutral, and not create any distinction on density between 55 and older or not, because of my desire to allow the market to decide that and to not make a public policy that would somehow be against recruiting Bel Air as the place for up-and-coming employment base for an up-and-coming, you know, tech-type-based economy associated with the technical advances through our military trajectory with AI and everything else, was looking for, I didn't see any more reason to incentivize an investor to come in and outbid another investor that wanted to be able to allow people to live in a place where more than 1/3 of the people living in the house were over the age of, you know, younger than 55. So that, I just wanted to share that perspective. As to but I understand that there are other benefits left in our zoning code, is that correct? If someone comes in with an under 55 community, they still can avail themselves of some other benefits that are non-density related, is that right?
You refer to
No.
under 55, or you
Yeah,
saying
for over 55, I mean.
Over 55 still has a few benefits relative to the performance standards that are found in the code.
Yeah,
One of the biggest benefits, and what happened maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, was that half the county was shut down because the schools were overcrowded. Well, if the 55 and over development came in, they didn't have to stop. They could move forward because they're 55 and over, they're not going to produce kids. So that was able to move forward without being interrupted, whereas any other more market-based development would have stopped. That's the one that I noticed more than any other, was that what happened several years ago.
do we have a distinction when we analyze parking availability between a 55 and over versus not?
Parking requirements for 55 and over require half a space less for each category. So if you have a 1-bedroom, it's a half a space less. 2-bedroom, half a space less.
So that's an advantage
Yes,
to a developer that is being retained
yes.
in
We
this
didn't
bill.
change
We're
that.
not stripping that out. That
No.
advantage is still there.
No.
Yeah. So when we look at these things, you know, because one of my, you know, concerns on looking at the density number was, wow, you know, I mean, like Overlook, Legacy, they have an elevator in there?
I believe they do.
Yeah, I think they do. That's an over 55, and I think that's federally required.
Well, I don't know if it's federally required,
It's
but
not.
just about anybody who's doing that
Okay.
better have an elevator in if they're going to sell
Because
their
I've talked,
units
some
for
of my
55.
friends were concerned about, you know, well, you know, could you still afford to build a place with an elevator if it was like, if you didn't go up to 30 versus 20, and clearly Legacy was developed, sold, you know, and that's roughly 18 units per acre, which is below 20.
Mhm.
So the market had shown that was economically feasible. So we're not.
Yes.
So if we go with 20, we're not imposing an economically unfeasible number with regard to the elevator analysis.
Right. If you, putting 20 units per acre out of the 3 that I looked at, it would have only impacted 1.
Yeah. So, you know, and so when I saw that, you know, my kind of perspective on it was for these two zones that haven't previously, don't currently have the density limits on. What I was looking at was, you know, I wouldn't have a problem with our number being 24 as a compromise between the 20 and the 30. You know, I'm just throwing that out there to the commissioners.
Yeah, in which zone is Hearthstone?
Oh, wow.
Pop quiz.
I think they originally developed in the that was B3, because that was where I want to say a factory was located for, come on, Mr. History.
The historian.
London Fog?
I want to say Eagle something or other, but I can't.
Yeah, they made one, but it was,
It was London Fog originally, 100
Okay.
years ago. I know that.
So, anyway, that was B3, and because of the way we stack our zoning, that residential development could go in there.
Got it.
So what I'm just throwing out for discussion would be that we would, for the B2A and B3A, we would move that number from 20 to 24.
For all developments, all multifamily, or just for 55 and over?
No, for all, just keeping it age neutral, not creating a special category for under or over 55, just staying age neutral, let the, you know, because of the, as I've expressed before, the changing dynamics that I've witnessed in my practice with estate planning, with who actually lives in the home, 3-generation living, is a big trend I've seen over the last 10 years. So I think that's here to stay, and I don't want to shut the door on families that, you know, are in, you know, have 2/3 of the home are under 55, you know. So that's, so I want to stay age neutral on that like you've done here. But I was talking about on the table on B2A and B3A, just moving that number from 20 to 24 and increasing that.
Only in those two zones?
Only in those two.
Okay.
So that would still
You
create.
probably want to go in the B3 also. I think
That-
that has a,
That was my thought, that if we're going to do that, we would probably want to go in B3 with that as well.
Yeah, I'm open to that. I'm just saying that,
Hearthstone right now is in zone R3,
is what?
is in R3.
It's in zone, because I think we
Yeah.
changed it
It
about
was,
10
it
years
was probably
ago.
industrial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we went through about 10 years ago, we changed a lot of the zoning, 2016, so that it reflected the existing uses that were there.
Right.
So King's Crossing changed, I think, so did Village, Hickory Village, so.
Right, so this legislation would not have any impact on Hearthstone? Because it's in R3.
'Cause
We're
it's-
not
yeah, 'cause
changing
it's-
anything in R3.
Well, so my.
Right, so if we,
Because
You're-
as I understood Commissioner Rutledge's intent, it was to go age neutral in B2A and B3A.
correct.
And it appears in the legislation that we've been presented, we're going age neutral in every zone.
there's no difference between the
Right.
multifamily and 55 and over regarding density.
So that would create,
So-
as this is written, as we have in front of us, that would create a non-conforming use
In
in
R3.
R3.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think Commissioner Taylor's absolutely right. My intent was just in these two particular zones to strip out the distinction based on age, on density.
So you're
I
okay,
wasn't asking to take it out of, I wasn't asking to change any of the densities in the Rs at all.
so those could remain for the 55 and
Right.
over?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's what we were just,
But what I was thinking about, you know, these other business, you know, oriented zones that we're introducing now a new density requirement, what I was saying, hey, this is an opportunity for me to express, you know, my convictions or beliefs, I'm subject to persuasion, but of saying, look, you know, let's get with the times here. And we got a couple sections of the town that we're gonna introduce density limitations, and I can't see a good public policy reason for giving investors or developers density bonus based upon age. I just have a problem with that. So, since we were going to be introducing the density for the first time in these two districts, I was saying this is an opportunity to make it age neutral, whatever the number is, whether it's 20, 24, 25, or 30 on the density. My point was, let's take that step in these two districts.
So then, Commissioner Rutledge, my understanding of your proposal is that the densities as they are with respect to age and everywhere except B2A and B3A would remain unchanged.
Yes, I would be very satisfied with that.
And that in B2A and B3A, they would become age neutral and the density would be set at 24, was your number?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
No, I agree with you on the
I think that's
age
a reasonable
neutral.
compromise.
I agree with you on the age. You know, we're only going to change it for the B2A and B3A and B3, taking out the over 55. Agree with that. And leaving all the other zones unchanged. Keep the over 55 in for all the other zones.
Okay.
You know, again, I don't, you know, 24?
For the-
By bringing that in and not giving the age difference, I don't know.
For the most part, parking limits, parking and open space will limit density. You know, we didn't have density limits in those zones and all. I only found one that would approach the limit of 20 units per acre, so.
I'm still looking at the 20. I mean, I thought we had some rationale behind the 20 because that's what we've been using in all the other areas. I don't see a need to go higher, in my opinion.
Yeah, my thinking was, you know, all the other areas was a 20-30 split, and you got the 30 if it was 55 and over, and 20 if not. And so I thought, well, and then when I saw that there was one, you know, Hearthstone 22.9, I thought, well, the 20 might be too restrictive, and I thought, well, you know, a good compromise would be 24 and age neutral. That was my thinking, Steve. That's, you know, might be flawed thinking, you know, that wouldn't be the first time.
No, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I get it. Okay. Kevin, on the other thing, I think we were trying to make the semi-detached and the two-family dwelling densities the same, I think on the B3 table.
That was the initial thought. I got the vibe from you a couple of weeks ago was that you didn't want to mess with that this go around. If you want to, I'll.
Oh, I thought we,
Because the other R zones and B1 and RO, all, we're changing that, but I was, if I
Because-
took that incorrectly, then I can put those back.
I don't think we had an objection to that,
right, I
if I
thought,
recall.
because they're basically the same definition.
Yes.
I think
And that's why I thought we were taking everything to 10,
Yes.
but on B3, you have 14 for semi-detached and 10 for two-family.
Right,
On
so
the table.
I can put those back in, if you like, and I just, maybe I was thinking you were.
I think in the conversation
R0,
of discussing
yeah.
other zones, we felt strongly about the townhome provision because we felt it would create a chilling effect when building new townhomes. But as it relates to this provision, I don't think any of us had any objection to
Okay.
it, so we can move forward with that.
All right, that'd be fine.
No, I didn't have any objections. I was just wondering what the definitional difference was between the semi-detached and the two-family dwelling. But,
Two-family is on one lot, semi-detached are on, each unit is on its
Okay.
own lot.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so I think, the bill that you've got, that is being discussed tonight, the draft of an ordinance 840-25, I think is a substantial improvement from the initial bill that we started to discuss, in my view, for a lot of reasons. But I'm particularly, pleased to see some consensus developed around not throwing out this rules to try to put up barriers to building townhouses. So that's gone. That's a major improvement in my view. I appreciate the compromise on that very much. And as Commissioner Taylor, characterized that, if we can just, have the bill only, eliminating that over age 55 provision just in those B2A and B3A and leave everything else alone.
And those would remain at 20 units per acre, correct? Those two developments.
I don't know how, I'm advocating for 24 in those. I don't know how Commissioner Taylor or Commissioner Chance feel about that, or maybe want to.
As far as the 2024 thing goes, I'll have to look more at some of the other examples that Kevin has provided, and the wisdom of 20 versus 24. It strikes me that the wisdom of 20 is in keeping with our other high-density zone, B3, as we've discussed. It strikes me that the wisdom of 24 is in looking at the Hearthstone development and thinking, well, if that's what's viable, we don't want to, close that off. If again, it's difficult to predict the future by looking at the past because this market changes so frequently and so quickly. But if the past is any indication, it might be a good idea to say, this is what was built at Hearthstone. We don't want to preclude anything. We don't want to preclude anything more than that. But I'm also sympathetic to Commissioner Chismar's line of argument that the wisdom of looking at B3 as the most restrictive zone and setting these least restrictive, most permissive. Thank you for that, Mr. Small. And it's not even 6:30 yet. It's very scary. But as the least restrictive zone, and setting these other formerly form-based zones to align with that. And I think we've played out the discussion about form-based, but just for the folks who may be listening now and for the first time, this decision wasn't made to do this arbitrarily. The decision was to move away from the form-based zoning, which I felt as though was not in the best interest of the town, and zone more traditionally in a Euclidean style that is the way the rest of the town is zoned. And so we looked at our least permissive, most permissive zone and took the lead from there. So that's where we got the number from. And I think that there is sound reason in that approach as well. So I will have to give that more thought between the time of this work session to our next town hall meeting.
One last thought regarding 20 versus 24 is that B2A, B3A, and B3 tend to be more intense. They tend to be more urban. If you get into the RO, R3, they're less so. And that may lend itself to the 24 to allow for some latitude there. But, I do know that we've done some research in other towns and municipalities, and 20 is on the upper end.
And we're talking about a town in Euclidean and not a Greek philosopher.
That is correct, but
Okay.
the town was named after the philosopher. So these things the snake has a way of eating its own tail.
Okay, so just summarizing, we're taking out only the over 55 in B2A, 3, and 3A, correct? Be age neutral.
Just B2A B3A.
not B3.
So it remains in B3?
Yeah, because these are the only two areas where we're removing the form zoning. B2A and B3A.
Okay.
We're heading away from form zoning towards Euclidean zoning
Well,
in those
you
two
still
with
have
regard,
form-based zones.
yeah,
Those are still form-based. You're just adding densities.
okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, and I think the other change was that the semi-detached and the two-family, we would, in all zones,
You could
we would,
keep the previous revisions.
right, keep the previous revisions, which was 10 dwelling units per acre. I
Yeah,
think is what we had.
I'll
right?
go back and look at
Yeah.
that.
Okay,
And so the small jury's still out on the 20 versus 24.
and that's just if, right, we can work that out in our minds.
Well, I didn't know whether
And then, you
Commissioner
know, there's
Chance
always
had
an-
any input on that while we're,
I'm still trying to figure out which of those two is the best way to go. So I need some time to work on that one. I do.
It can always be amended at,
Yeah,
Please, you know.
I think in general, we have a lot of work to do still on this. But the 2024 thing is not settled on yet.
okay.
Okay.
Right, any more discussion on that? Nope, okay.
just a final point. Since you were the sponsor of the initial legislation, Commissioner Chismar, I would, from a drafting standpoint on what is brought before the commission for the meeting, I would defer to his, I'm not going to agree that I won't move to a 24, but I think the bill should be presented with the 20 number in it because he's the promoter of the legislation. I think that that's a courtesy to him that he would deserve.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Rutledge. All right. Next item, Resolution 1245-24, a resolution renewing the allowance for temporary outdoor dining while discontinuing the exemption allowing temporary structures such as tents in the town of Bel Air.
I will take the introduction of that.
Okay.
My condition notwithstanding. Just because this is something that I prompted the town staff to draft, and certainly when I provide a summary that is not adequate, I will ask them to fill in the pieces that I've missed. But essentially, it is my understanding that the board is not of the disposition to extend our COVID policies because the COVID emergency is over. And I believe that assertion to be reasonable. Well, notwithstanding those policies, we can look around and see that the COVID emergency is in fact over. And so it is now incumbent upon us to navigate our way out of the moratorium legislation that we had previously had in place. For the most part, it seems as though the resolution can be allowed to expire. All previous regulations and requirements will snap back. However, I was concerned that the timeline that we offered businesses who currently avail themselves of these benefits was just a little bit too short to allow them the time to properly navigate towards a permanent solution with dealing with the post-COVID regime of rules. And so in discussions with the town administrator, with Mr. Krantz, Mr. Small, Mr. Klein, we came up with a narrowly tailored resolution, no pun intended, to allow businesses who avail themselves of the outdoor dining benefit to continue to do so with that temporary use for an extended 6 months on top of what the resolution is now. So that would take us out to September 30th for those counting at home, while allowing the other provisions of the law to sunset. Largely because those provisions of the law, after discussing with Mr. Klein in particular, seem to run afoul of some other regulations that the town has adopted, including the International Building Code. And I'm not of the mind to extend those expansions any longer because it puts us in a position where we are at odds with the International Building Code, and that's not a position in which we want to find ourselves. So I would say that this solution to extend the temporary use for dining for another 6 months is a common sense compromise that will give our businesses in town the space they need to navigate to a permanent solution, while also finally giving the town the wind down on the COVID emergency and bringing us back to, as President Harding would have said, a sense of normalcy. Mr. Small, Mr. Krantz, if you'd like to add anything, please feel free, but I wanted to give my synopsis of why I feel the need to bring this forward. Mr. Klein, did you want to add anything? I apologize, I didn't ask you.
No, I'm doing some investigation on the whole matter. Really, the main pieces that relate to me is through the International Fire Code.
Oh, okay.
And it's really important in my view that any tents that are permitted for temporary use, the fire code says they're allowed up for 180 days within a 12-month period of time.
Right.
So if people with current tents would like to continue allowing their tent up for 180 more days after the days that we cut off for this year, I would like to request that they get a new building permit starting at that date, say, for example, April 1st.
Right.
And I say that because in looking at that information, a lot of it has to do with fire retardant on the materials, ingress, egress into the tent, distance away from the tent from other structures, and a whole bunch of life safety matters with pertaining to fire. So I think it would be very important, since it hasn't been permitted for 2 years during this period of time, that that be done. So, for example, if they did not want to start on April 1st and they wanted to wait for a while, they would just start at a certain time. They would need to get a building permit, and then they would be allowed to keep the tent up for 180 days in a 12-month period. And that's all I need.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Yeah.
I appreciate that addition. You know, again, for the sake of the legislation, I didn't want to tinker with the International Fire Code. That's generally not a good idea. And so my goal is specifically to allow businesses who depend on the economic gain of the temporary use for outdoor dining to be able to do that without significantly impacting their business in a negative way over the course of the next, well, from here it will be the next 8 months, which is why I wanted to bring it up as soon as possible. To give them, I'm calling it sort of a soft landing period to navigate a permanent solution.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? So, Steve, actually, questions might be for you to piggyback on what you were just saying. If a person wants to, if a tent is currently up and they want to keep it up and not take it down, when should they apply for that building permit?
Prior to March the 31st.
Okay.
I would like to have it all licensed and done deal by the April 1st, starting that 180-day period.
That answers my question. Thank you.
I think it's a very reasonable resolution and a good compromise. I thank you for crafting that.
So if I understand this, Jake, you still have to get a permit for a tent, correct?
Yes, so the tent regulations will go back to as they were pre-COVID. That's correct.
Yes.
Well, what are we allowing to continue through September 30th?
So my short answer to that is the temporary use for outdoor dining. I'll turn it over to Mr. Small for the long form answer.
Yes, we would just continue that.
Okay. All right, because there's really only about two businesses that I know of that have still stuff out for outdoor dining, and that's Zeewald and IBC, correct? They're the only two that are there.
Z-Vault would not be affected. They don't have a tent up, so.
Okay, they don't have a tent up.
But they are affected by the outdoor dining.
Well, it would just continue on.
Right,
until-
that's what I mean. They'd be able to access the benefit.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Chismar, also, like, for example, Looney's has their St. Patrick's Day big event and so forth like that, they're really good at going and getting all the building permit information, meeting with
Right.
the fire marshal, but they only keep it up for 5 or 6 days, so it's not really a big issue.
Right, we always allowed that. That's a
Yes.
special permit type situation
Yes,
that
but
you
they
get.
they still are required to get the building permit because of the size of the tent, which is over
Okay.
400 square feet, and then all the other information that they have to cross the Ts and dot the Is for through the fire marshal.
Okay. 'Cause I guess the thing I was questioning is, what is the plan so that for the businesses that this affects, that we don't, so that when this expires in September, I mean, do they have a plan to get, so they don't need this anymore? I mean,
Well, I think that.
or are we just we're just kicking the can down the road till September? That's my, I'm lack of information there.
So I think the idea is that this is the final 6 months to say, we're paring down everything in the COVID resolution, with the exception of the outdoor dining, because we understand that the outdoor dining is sort of the most central component when it comes to a business's revenue side, right? So that's gonna be the most relevant component here
Right.
of all the things that we're talking about. And so we are extending that particular piece for another 6 months so that we don't sort of close the gate on them, what may be an important piece of their business model, but we give them 6 months to continue to access those benefits while understanding that this is the final 6 months. And that, yes, a permanent solution will need to be, well in the works by then. So yes, that is the intention, Commissioner Chismar.
Yeah, but in 6 weeks, are you gonna be able to, or in 6 months, is that solution going to be able to be implemented?
Well,
That's-
I think that 8 months from now is a lot more feasible than 2 months from now. And that's my intention here.
I know, but back when we extended this back in January of last year, we said this was it. And we said, no, we're not gonna shut it off. We're gonna give you a year to figure out how to fix this.
Well, to that point, I think that there was some confusion about, the quote, "this was it," on, this board, maybe among the staff as well, and among the public. There were countervailing comments, not through anyone's fault, but just, I think when we all
Right.
voted on that, the 5 of us may have had different things in mind. I'm, again, in line with the rest of my colleagues that the COVID emergency is over. I'm not interested in kicking the can on that resolution again by passing another blanket
Right.
extension. That's why I crafted this specific provision to give folks who need the help that they need, while also letting the other things snap back, with the understanding that everything will snap back at the end of September.
Yeah, I just feel more comfortable if I knew what the plan was for the businesses that need this. That's all. Or are we just extending it through the summer to get it through the summer? And like I said, kicking the can down the road. If they have a plan and they have a way of implementing it, I'd like to see it, and I'd be all for it. Okay, but if it's just an effort if it's just something to kick the can down the road, I don't know if I'm for it. That's all. I'd like to see the plan. How are we going to get by it?
One of the entities has produced several plans, and I can
Okay.
actually sit down with any of the commissioners who would like to and show them. I think one of the problems that they're facing is that they're not owners of the land they sit on, and the owners of the land are not moving as fast as they probably could. And that's something that this extra 6 months would probably assist with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be the bad guy here. I really, I fully support the business community in that, but, this is
Well,
2 years in the going.
I'll say this, Steve, we are planning on scheduling a public hearing for this piece of legislation, and so at that time, I
Right.
think that there will be an opportunity for any community partners who feel strongly one way or the other about this piece of legislation to speak on it, and perhaps an opportunity then to answer those questions.
Oh, I would welcome it, yeah.
Yeah.
I would welcome it, yeah. So, okay.
You make a valid point, Commissioner Josmar, and you know, it's a reasonable and valid concern. The problem sometimes is that, you know, it's like parent with a child. It's like, no, you can't do that. And they're thinking, well, you know, they let my older sister do it, so they'll probably, you know, and people have a tendency to even read into, maybe hope that they really don't mean the hard line. So now I think the message is being sent very, very clearly that there's not going to be any change in mind come fall. Not for me. I mean, I originally was where you are, which was, nope, that's it, no more extensions. And I was like, hey, you know, hold the hard line. You know, I've become persuaded by Commissioner Taylor's, you know, views on this. He's done a lot of work on it, talked to a lot of folks, and, you know, for whatever reasons, I think that maybe we weren't taken seriously enough. And so now it's a very serious deal, but this business, you know, is a huge part of our community, and the people there, you know, bust their butts, and they've come up with great products, and people, you know, I want to do whatever I can to help our town thrive that way. So on balance, I'm supportive of this compromise.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I do, like, I agree with a lot of what you said. IBC and is a big part of this community. And I don't want to do anything to hurt them, but I want to make sure all businesses are on a level playing field. And that's all. That's all. I mean, it is, this ordinance will apply to everybody, but a lot of other businesses have already pulled down their COVID outdoor dining. So
I agree with giving them the extension that they need. However, I really do feel that there's got to be some push for those properties that they don't own, that they use for parking, are addressed. We've got to do something about those two buildings, and we all know which ones I'm talking about, have got to be taken care of. And so that we're not in this situation again and again and again. And that's been the driving force for them. But I'm all for going ahead and giving them the extension for the tent, but I do really feel that we have to pay attention to those, I call them dangerous buildings and properties, so, and that's all in the mix here.
any other discussions? Okay, then, with that, the next item on our agenda is the road improvement right-of-way deed for Lester Way. I assume that is Mr. Klein.
That's me. Thank you, sir. Yes, as a condition of the development, the owners are conveying to the town .055 acres of right-of-way along Lester Way. They need to do that per the development agreement that I'll be discussing with you next, so that they can make improvements on the road surface of Lester Way and widening it a little bit, as well as putting in curb and gutter and some storm drain systems.
Okay.
So that'll all be in the packet with all the signed, sealed, and legal stuff.
Anybody have any comments?
Just Steve, so what'll be presented, it's all you and our town council, Liz, of
Yeah, it's already been
everything's
reviewed.
thoroughly vetted,
It's
thoroughly
been
reviewed.
thoroughly vetted already, thoroughly
Yeah, and,
reviewed.
this-
It's actually already been signed by the by the owners, which are the standard on bond joint
Yeah.
ventures. So it's all basically just needs your approval. At
Right.
which time, the Madam Mayor can sign it on behalf of the Board of Town Commissioners.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Yep.
from my perspective, you know, speaking on my own behalf, this is like, should be there'll be a presentation, we'll approve it, move on.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Just one of those things you have to do. Dot the
Right.
i's and cross the t's.
Any other comments? All right, so move on to the next item, Public Works and Development Agreement, the standard on bond.
That's
Mr.
me
Klein?
again, sir. Yes, it's a Public Works Agreement, Public Works and Developer Agreement, actually, because it's an agreement between the town and developer. And it gets back to the Public Works Agreement must be executed between the owner and developer and the town, ensuring that the construction and completion of the improvements to Lester Way and the installation of storm drains, curbs, gutters, and sanitary sewer infrastructure be installed properly. Because at the end of the project, of course, the town will be taking over the responsibility to the ownership and maintain that new infrastructure in the town's right-of-way. So this is an agreement. It lays out that, like, we've collected a $111,000 bond to ensure that they do these improvements correctly. It'll have an independent inspector who comes in and inspects the work that's being performed to our satisfaction. And once it's done, we have a 1-year warranty, and we hold a 10% bond on the work for that 1-year period. So this is, again, kind of a simple thing. I'll put this before you, and you'll be able to
Okay.
review it in full, and we'll sign it. Once you sign it, I'm sign it as Director of Public Works, and Eddie signs as Town Administrator.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Next item, Commissioners' Liaison Reports.
I just have a brief report from the Historic Preservation Commission. They are looking at and have started some discussion about different ways to incentivize homeowners to voluntarily enter their homes into the historic program. And so there's some discussion about, you know, what the tax credits are that are given for homeowners when they're doing, you know, approved improvements. And they've discussed that there's kind of a cascade of kind of priorities. You know, you've got like, well, you know, basic maintenance, but then you have where they're actually on the other end of the spectrum of really bringing back and restoring a house to really its former glory, in the sense there could be some historic homes that had been approved to use certain type of siding in the past, but that if they went to something that was much more historic than what's already allowed and they have on their home, that could bring it even back more towards a genuine historic time. And so to do that, the commissioners on the Historic Preservation Commission are looking at, they're grappling with right now, and I imagine they will have at some point a proposal that I will work with them on to bring a piece of legislation before the commission here, the town board, at some point to talk about, you know, setting some tiers of their tax credit system, so that, you know, rudimentary things will get, you know, basic tax credit, and then as if someone does something really fantastic and is bringing a house really back, like, okay, the vinyl windows were approved, but now they're going to come back with, you know, a beautiful wooden ones or wood type product or material that really brings it back, they would get a higher credit. So I've got a lot to learn about that process myself. I don't know all the ins and outs. It was a very informative discussion last week about it, but I think as there's definitely a sense among the Historic Preservation Commissioners that if we have a higher incentive system built into that on the front end, it makes for better marketing on people to voluntarily come in to the program. So that's something, this little highlight. I probably missed a lot of the detail on that relating it, but I think you get the sense of it. And they're not asking, they're not looking at asking for something that's beyond what the law would allow, but there are certain percentages that we have room to move in certain areas. So just wanted to bring that up.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, as a past member of that committee and owner of a historic home, I support those efforts. Be nice to be able, and there's a lot more historic structures in town, a lot more inventory properties in town. It'd be nice to be able to get them designated. And if this helps get it, I support anyway. I think that would be a good idea to come forth with some legislation that might incentivize more people to designate.
Great.
I think it'd be a good idea. Jake, anything?
Neither of mine have met in the last 2 weeks, so the
Okay.
desk is clear.
Neither have mine, so, okay. Staffing report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Krantz, yes.
We have 3 jobs posted live on the town website right now. We have a police officer job where we're currently accepting applications for lateral officers, as well as applicants who are aspiring to become police officers. So we are encouraging all to apply, perhaps with a nod to experienced police officers who might want to lateral into our agency. We have a laborer position posted in the Department of Public Works, and we have a deputy director for the Planning and Zoning Department also posted. Those can all be applied for on the town website, and that's what we have vacant at the moment. With regards to committees and commissions, we're looking pretty good going into the next month. Perhaps on the horizon, you see the Economic and Community Development Commission, the Tree Committee, and the Board of Ethics in May.
So Mr. Boyle has indicated his intention to reapply.
Oh,
He has been sent the appropriate form by Director Robertson, and so you should see that rolling through anytime, and I know that we'll get a forward when that does come through.
Mr. Krantz, the police officer position, how long has that been open?
Posted today,
Posted today, and the laborer, that's been open for a while?
just for a few days.
Oh, just for a few
All of
days.
these have been posted within the last week.
Okay. Okay, I thought we had one open for a while, that's why I was just asking about that. Okay,
We also have some good applicants for officers we're already interviewing. Don't
Great,
think it's gonna be
great,
vacant
okay.
very long. Yes, sir.
thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Krantz, who would take lead on the talking to Bill Bolton and Teresa Rose about their intentions on the Ethics Committee, Board of Ethics? Would you take that?
They have already expressed their interest to be reappointed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent news. Thank you.
Okay. All right, our next item is the calendar. Everyone had a chance to review the calendar. Mr. Hopkins, I had a question about the Municipal Citizens Academy. I believe you answered that already. We have 6 to 8 candidates, and, okay. Anything the staff wanted to point out of specific on the calendar? No?
Commissioner Chismar, I'd like to add one thing on there.
Sure.
Throw a bone out for the Bel Air Police Explorer Post Bingo event that's going to be held.
This Friday?
This Friday, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Doors open at 6 o'clock, and bingo starts at 7 o'clock, and you get to be entertained by the famous Rick Kraus and his crew. There will be food there, and I'm pretty sure there's still some ticket openings. There's still some slots open. It's $20 a ticket, and we hope to see some people there. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure it's going to be packed. So.
All right.
Officer Kraus is involved, we know it will be a
Oh,
good
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Right. Is he going to be the caller?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay,
Chief,
there we go.
Yes,
who
ma'am.
do I get in touch with about tickets?
I'll touch base with you.
Okay.
We'll make sure you get tickets.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Yes, yes,
All
ma'am.
right, thanks.
Thank you.
I believe, Mary, I believe it was on, it's posted on our events calendar. I mean, online, if you, the website.
Yeah, but I wanted to, an update.
Oh, okay. All right.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Sure. Next thing on our agenda is the miscellaneous, the discussion of the Maryland Senate Bill 324, admissions and assessment and amusement tax for food and beverages. Who was, Mr. Hopkins?
It's going to fall to me, unless, Kat, you have something. Do you have talking points?
Yes, I do have some.
Sure. I defer to you first.
I do have some talking points that we received from the county economic development from the new tourism manager at the county. The bill that's proposed, Senate Bill 324, is proposing to authorize counties and municipalities in Maryland to impose the admissions and amusement tax on gross receipts from the sale of food and beverages at locations where food or beverages are consumed on-site, such as restaurants or venues with dining areas. However, it would prohibit applying the tax on certain types of food and beverage sales, including those for off-site premises consumption, alcoholic beverages sold for off-premises consumption, or food from vending machines. The minimum tax rate would be capped at 3% for the sale of food and beverages under the provision, and this food and beverage tax is not included in the combined total tax cap rate of 11%, which includes sales and use tax. The tax rate for food and beverages is separate from the regular admissions and amusement tax and cannot exceed the 3%. Some of the talking points that we were given, which is a collective stance from the destination marketing organizations throughout the state of Maryland, include impacts including increased costs for visitors if counties or municipalities start applying the admissions and amusement tax to food and beverages sales. It would directly increase the overall cost of dining out for tourists. There would be uncertainty and complexity. Different localities could implement varying tax rates and rules, and this could lead to confusion for tourists and visitors. Also, with competing destinations, the higher taxes could prompt tourists to choose other locations where the overall cost of visiting or vacationing is lower. The perception of overtaxation, tourists might view this as an unnecessary or excessive tax, particularly if they already feel taxed on other aspects of their visit or vacation. And the possibility of business closures or downsizing. The restaurants, cafes, other food and beverage serving businesses in tourist areas may face decreased customer volume, which could impact the business, as far as closing or layoffs and that sort of thing, and also the negative impact to local employment. If tourism drops or businesses struggle due to the added tax burden, local workers in hospitality, retail, and service industries could face reduced job opportunities or lower wages.
And if I can piggyback on those comments, Mr. Vice Chair. So we received this was a last-minute drop to us last week. We were asked for comments the day before the comments were actually due. So there was no opportunity for us to get this before you all for any type of review or commenting. We did check with Aberdeen, Havre de Grace. At that time, we checked with them. They were unaware of the legislation, so they did not have an opinion as to which way they were going to fall, on which side of favorable or unfavorable for this. When I went online today, this bill was, actually, the hearing is tomorrow, but comments were due to go on the record last Friday, the 24th. It is the first read for tomorrow. Checking MML's website, one of the priorities that MML has put forth this year, one of their ones, they've devoted a section of their website to it, is revenue generating for municipalities. So in that regard, MML, according to their check sheet, has taken a favorable position on this legislation. As Kat alluded to, the DMOs are not, the direct marketing organizations are not in favor of this legislation. It's important to note, too, that this is enabling local legislation. So it does, even if it's approved, it's on us to decide whether we want to implement it or not. And like I said, Aberdeen and Havre de Grace, we do not have a read from them as to where they wanted their opinions of it. So.
I can say that my position on this legislation from the municipal perspective is at risk of being crude. Thanks, but no thanks. I certainly have no intention of bringing this policy to Bel Air if it does make its way through the General Assembly, and I hope it doesn't make its way through the General Assembly. I'm all about enabling municipalities to do things that they need to do, but I am not in favor of enabling municipalities to tax citizens who already live in one of the most overtaxed states in the country. And at a time with cost of living skyrocketing, and eating out at a restaurant is one of the few comforts that many cling to as a sense of normalcy, one of the few things that they can still barely afford when they can. I don't see this as a good policy. I understand that we are in a precarious budgetary situation and that the state will have to take a hard look at a lot of different revenue and spending. I emphasize spending more than revenue for the state perspective, even though they tend to look at revenue more than they look at spending. But I can say from my perspective, and this is speaking solely from my position, this would not be good for Bel Air. This would not be good for the state of Maryland. Kat, you hit the nail right on the head. There is already the perception of overtaxation. It's not just the perception, it's the reality of overtaxation. So I am disappointed with MML's position. I understand MML's position, but I don't think in the long run this will be good for Maryland municipalities. I think in the long run this will encourage people to visit Pennsylvania municipalities. This will encourage people to visit Virginia municipalities. Folks who live in Southern Maryland will go to Williamsburg. Folks who live up here will go to Kennett Square. There are other places to go and have a cheaper, just as enjoyable time. We want to make sure that the town of Bel Air and the state of Maryland maintains competitive. So that's my soapbox on the issue, and it's unfortunate that we were sort of dropped this at the 11th hour. I'm sure that that was of no intent, as I suspect that MML is suspecting its members to back them on this, even though I personally don't. But we will just have to see how the process plays itself out.
Commissioner Taylor, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. We are overtaxed as it is. I don't see us, even if it was, like you said, passed, I would not use that as something in there. But I do have some questions. I'm just trying to hedge bets that if it does pass, if the county levies a 3%, does the town get any of that for the businesses that are in town? I mean, it's not.
I don't believe.
But
so.
if they're gonna tax our residents, then why?
I read the legislation again this afternoon before I came to the meeting.
Yeah.
I did not see any
I
where the
didn't see it.
county's required to divide up.
Right.
I think
I
it
didn't either.
allows us to implement up to 3% if we want, but I didn't see where there was any kind of tax sharing.
Right, and then if the county implements 3 and a municipality implements 3 at 6%? Yeah.
To that point, my concern is that if it is passed, and we are, fiduciaries of the town and responsible stewards of their tax dollars and choose not to, and elect not
Right.
to enforce it, that the state might look unfavorably on that and say, well, why are you asking us for money? Because we've given you a tool to get the money out of your people's own pocketbook, so why aren't you using that? The state
No,
of Maryland has
agreed.
a nasty habit of doing that. And so I
Yeah.
am gravely concerned about the impact that it will have on our relationship with our revenues. And the worst part of it is it's through no fault of our own citizens. It essentially is the state mandating that we go to our citizens first instead of going to the tax dollars that they've already paid the state of Maryland. We've got a double dip. So
No, I
I
agree.
am concerned.
Yeah.
Director Moody, I saw you. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're fine. I agree with Eddie. I didn't see anything, to answer your question, Steve, about the splitting. I mean, it's gonna work just like admission and amusement tax. The county
Okay.
has a rate, municipality has a rate. They get their money, we get our money. It's not a split. If we choose not to do just the normal A&A that we have now, the county doesn't say, well, here's your portion of ours. So
Yeah, 'cause-
I didn't see anything in there that there's any type of splitting. And Jake, to your point, it is very concerning from the state's perspective, because they certainly can say, well, you've been asking for additional revenue sources, we're giving you something,
and now you're turning it down. How is MML going to continue to go back to the state and say, you've got to give municipalities a way to raise revenue? This is it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, I just don't see it winning on either side of the coin. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't type of decision. I was at the Maryland GFOA, that's the governor's Government Finance Officers Association conference on Friday, and we had a representative from MACO and a representative from MML, and both of them, this was a topic that they both spoke to, and it was just that, probably a little bit more on the MML side than MACO, but just that we've been asking the state to provide additional revenue sources, enabling legislation for the municipalities, and we finally have something. This is a lot to try to work through, for sure. So I'm not sure how it's going to go.
Was the MACO rep kind of for this?
He didn't really speak. He was probably a little bit more silent on it, but I don't know that he would disagree if he did disagree. But he was not as vocal as the MML rep was. So.
Right. I don't know if we want to take any. Well, there would be comments available at a second reading, right? We provided.
There
what
would
then?
not.
There
I
would
mean,
not?
it'll cross over to the House. I don't know what it's looking, I know that the Senate hearing is tomorrow, but it wouldn't get public comment on the second reading once it gets reported back to the floor. Public comment only happens after the first reading when it's been assigned to a committee and there's a hearing in the committee. Now, if it moves through the Senate, which would be an unfortunate development, but if it moves through the Senate, it'll have to go over to the House. I don't know if there's a House cross-file. I don't think that there is. At that point, then, we could, I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, but I think you were talking about perhaps having a position for
yeah,
us, yes.
Right.
At that point, then, there would be an opportunity to articulate a position ahead of the House hearing, and I would imagine that this would probably go through the House Ways and Means Committee. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Jake, do you have any sense of where the Harford County delegation is coming down on this thing?
Well, I won't say so because I've not heard anyone discuss it or take the issue up. The delegation hasn't been polled. I'll say two things about the Harford County delegation. We have a lot of members who care about municipalities, but we also have a lot of members who care about residents not being, taxed into oblivion and, not being able to afford a night out to eat. So, any overture that I would make to our representatives would be to oppose this. I suspect that the inclination of most members of the delegation will be to oppose it, but absolutely don't quote me on that because I have not spoken to any of them. That's just taking my understanding of what has happened in the past when these types of tax-enabling bills have come up. We are a delegation that has a Republican majority. The Republican caucus, the minority caucus, has tended to oppose these types of legislation. But we'll have to see, we'll see particularly tomorrow the types of questioning and opposition, if any opposition comes forward at the hearing, to see what the two sides of this, what shape they take tomorrow.
Okay. Any other comment from the?
Steve, if I
Yes.
may, it's not necessarily on this Senate bill, but just to mention something that we were told, all of the attendees of the conference on Friday from the MML rep, take it as you will, but she feels very strongly that she has gotten, MML has gotten support from Annapolis that they will not touch highway user revenues in this legislative session.
Well, that's a good breath of
So,
fresh
like I
air.
said, take it with a grain of salt.
But, yeah.
And it hasn't just come from, I guess, one place. It's come from several places in Annapolis that it is not on the chopping
table.
block. They are not going to touch it. She even went as far as to say that she did not believe that they were going to touch it for fiscal year '27. The reason for that is because it sunsets in fiscal year '28. So it's fiscal year '28 that we all need to be concerned with, several years from now. But maybe some good news with our highway users not being touched. But obviously, we'll keep an eye on it for sure. But I just wanted to share that with you all.
Okay, thank you for that.
Lisa, real quick, did you hear anything about state aid or any of the other grants?
No, they didn't mention anything, any of the other grants.
Well, in that regard, the email you sent this afternoon, obviously with the election of the new president, there is a hold on all federal grants while OMB looks at those grants, look at their efficacy, and so we don't know. Some of the stuff that filters from the feds to the state to us, we don't know what's gonna happen with it. Right now, it's being frozen.
Okay. All right, well, then with that, any commissioners' comments? No? Nope, all right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.